Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second information session on the 2018-19 Highway Maintenance Contract Renewal Project. This follows up on the information session we had back in September, which was for the request for qualifications phase. We are now moving into the request for proposals phase, and that's what this information session is for. To go over some of the housekeeping items of what we'll be doing this afternoon. So I want to mention, obviously, there's a bunch of people here live in the audience, but we do have many people online watching this by video. I think we have over 100 people tuned in online. I figure we also have some media watching as well, so just to let you know, there's lots of interest in this project. This information is being recorded, so this whole session, the recording of this session will be available on our website at a future date. So just to let you know, if there's something that you missed, or if you know people that might be interested in seeing this and couldn't attend today, they will have a chance to see it through that recording. Obviously, the goal of this is for us to cover some of the information on our request for proposals, but is also to allow you to ask questions. That is the whole point. We want to be able to provide as much information to you as possible, recognizing that you have a lot of information to wade through in these first RFPs, as well as any future RFPs that will be coming out. So if you have questions, this is a great time to ask them. For those of you live here in the audience, we do have a microphone. Rachel does have a cordless microphone, so if you do have a question, please flag her down, and that'll indicate to me that there's a question that will be asked. And I will repeat the question just to make sure people online hear the question. For those of you that are online, if you do have a question, you can send it through email to the email address that's on the bottom of the page that you see online here. The email address is the same address where you would have applied to register for this session. So if you go back to our same website, go to that email address. That's the place where you'll send the emails in. And if any online questions come in, Christine and Dan are monitoring the email address, and we'll be reading out those questions as well and trying to answer them as best as possible. If there are questions that we can answer right away, that we need to do a bit of research, we will provide the answer later. And just to let you know, all of the questions, whether we answer them or not now, but all of the questions and answers will be posted later on our data room site. So just to go through some of the things we want to cover today. So like I say, we want to cover the items that are actually in these requests for proposals, not only the ones that are out right now, but ones that will be coming out in the future. Want to go over the terms of the agreement, and we'll discuss a little bit about the specifications as well. Most of you will know that the draft version of the specifications have been out since September, and there have been some minor changes to that, but so we'll discuss that as well. Then after that, later Al's going to do a bit of a tour through the data room to show you what information is in there. It's changed a bit since if anyone's looked at the one that was in Service Area 11. So there's a lot more information, and Al's going to show you what's in there and how to navigate it as best as possible, again, to help you when you're putting your bids together. And then at the end, I'll go through some of the next steps that we'll be going through over the next few months. And like I say, questions from you. If you do have any questions, I do encourage you to ask them right away. Don't wait till the end. While it's current in your mind and we're on that topic, let's talk about it right away. The whole point of this is to be interactive, so if you do have questions, let's discuss them. If you have the question, I'm sure somebody else will have the same question. So, for starters, going through what is some of the key information that's in the request for proposals and in the agreement. Probably one of the first key things is you must be on our qualified respondents list to actually put in a bid on our RFPs. So all of you are probably aware we did have a request for qualifications. An RFQ came out in mid-September. That's the one that closed mid-October. A qualified respondents list came out this week on our website. So you have to be on that list if you're going to bid on these first 3 RFPs that are out right now. And then going forward in the future, for any future RFPs, if you're not on that list now, we will have future intakes. So future RFQs will be coming out at key times for future RFPs. So if you do want to bid on an RFP, you're not on there now, keep an eye out for the next RFQs. I should mention there is a second RFQ out right now for the next 5 service areas that will be coming up available. So that came out this morning. And so take a look at that if you're not on the list right now. If you're not aware already, the term length for these new contracts is a term of 10 years with an optional 5-year extension. That option is at the discretion of the ministry. We currently, there's no, and you'll see there's nothing in there about any metrics or parameters that we're using to decide whether we're going to do the 5 years or not. It's at our discretion. And we'll be reviewing that, most likely getting in around year 8 or so, recognizing that it takes us a couple of years to post a new set of contracts. Well, so that would be around the time we'd probably decide if we're extending or not, but it'll be at the ministry's discretion. And also in there is a requirement for labor succession. So you'll see that succession language in these contracts, similar to the 0304 contracts. So what that means is if you are a contractor that's interested in bidding on a service area, you must offer continued employment to the unionized workforce that is in that service area, and you also must honor their new ratified collective agreement. So as these service areas are coming online, each of them are ratifying a collective agreement. That new collective agreement is available in our data room, so I encourage you obviously to take a look at that. For those of you familiar with the existing collective agreements, there is some changes to them, so I encourage you to take a look. We did negotiate some labor savings, and those labor savings are identified in those agreements. So look at them very closely, obviously, as you're putting together your bid, so that'll help you decide all your labor terms as you're putting your bids together. And also, no maintenance charge is going to be provided in any of these RFPs that are coming up, but we will still be providing gravel pits. So some other key information in the agreement, there is new work reporting requirements. You'll see if you take a look in our data room, hopefully all of you have got your access for your data room and starting to look in there. There is a new maintenance services reporting manual. That manual will describe the work activities that we are looking for. It'll describe the frequency that we want those activities reported out, and it also provides the format that we want it reported out. All work activities now will be provided to the ministry electronically, and it describes in there how that information will be provided. We worked closely with industry to make sure that how the format that we're asking for it should be compatible with most work reporting systems that you're currently using now. So hopefully this is not an onerous task, that you should be able to provide us this information. But take a look at that manual. It'll describe all of those requirements. There is also a new requirement for automated vehicle tracking, and this is only for winter maintenance activities. Again, take a very close look at the wording in there. It's fairly specific of what we're looking for the vehicle tracking. So a couple of things we are going to be looking for. One is we're looking for, I think we have a question out in the audience here.
Yeah, Ian, you touched a minute ago on the labor succession and the requirement to provide labor succession in the contingent on a ratified collective agreement. Could you maybe touch on what will happen if there isn't a ratified collective agreement in each service area?
Sure. So the question was, I was talking about the labor succession, and I mentioned that you have to honor the ratified collective agreement. So the question was, what happens if a collective agreement isn't ratified in a service area? So there are terms that if a ratified collective agreement cannot be achieved in a particular service area, then that successor requirement will not be in that particular service area. So the way you'll know is that by the time the RFP is coming out, we'll have determined that at that point. So if the successor language is in there, then we have obviously achieved a ratified collective agreement, and subsequently you'll also see a ratified collective agreement in the data room, and if we don't, we will remove that wording and there won't be a ratified collective agreement. So back to the automated vehicle tracking. So vehicle tracking, couple things we'll be looking for. One is we'll be looking for a link to a website from you, and it'll be your website that'll be providing us the location of vehicles doing winter maintenance. So that'll be plow vehicles, graders, and any patrol vehicles. Patrol vehicles could be plows or whatever other vehicles you're using for winter patrol. It's only in real time. We don't want any historical data. We don't want to actually have this data. The data always stays with you, the contractor. We just want to be able to see it. Again, this is more for us doing our own QA to see where vehicles are, especially during a winter storm event. The other thing we are looking for is that we want you to keep this electronic data. Again, you keep the data. We don't want actually the data, but we want the ability to be able to audit the data if we come in to request it. So what we'll be doing, and again, this is for us doing our auditing function, is we may come to you after a winter storm and say, all right, in that last winter storm, I'd like to see this historical vehicle tracking data to demonstrate that you are meeting the specifications. And we'll take a look at that. We'll look at the data. We won't take the data or download the data. We'll just look at it and say, all right, we've confirmed that the contractor met the winter specifications for that storm event. And it allows us to complete our audits. So again, you keep the actual data. We'll just audit it. And the only other thing we'll be requiring in there is we want you to keep the data for at least that winter season. So I think it's May 31st of that contract year. We want you to keep the data for that. So again, if we need to look at any of the data during that winter season, we want to be able to do that. after May 31st. It's up to you what you want to do with that information, but we'll need it at least for that winter season. Going on, quantified maintenance services. There is a new quantified maintenance services schedule. For those of you, if you remember, in 0304, basically we just provided the list of quantified services. If you've seen Service Area 11, there is actually more text, more wording describing what the quantified services are, how they're managed and monitored, and there's rules in there on how much you can carry forward and carry back across contract years. So take a look at that text. You'll see now there's a requirement for a rolling 2-year quantified plan. So that's something that we want you as a contractor working with the district in that service area to work on a 2-year quantified plan and making sure that quantified plan satisfies the needs of that infrastructure in that service area. You will see also, compared to 0304, all the quantified items were unit price. In Service Area 11, we had unit price and lump sum items. You'll see in this new quantified plan, there will be even more unit price items and more lump sum items. And the idea being there that we tried to break down some of the items a little more, recognizing that if you're trying to put a unit price on something, it can be very difficult if it's too broad-based. And that's also the idea of the lump sum activities as well, is that we made some of the activities lump sum for ones that would be difficult to put a unit price. So for instance, culverts deeper than 2 meter depth. If it's less than 2 meters depth, fairly shallow culvert installation, fairly straightforward. We think that for you it's fairly easy to put together a unit price per lineal meter of install. Once you start getting greater than 2 meters, that can be very difficult because it could be 3 meters, 4 meters, 16 meters. You suddenly have a lot of traffic management issues. You're digging up a lot of fill. You could have water management issues. Very difficult to put a unit price on. So for those ones, we expect you then to, if we're doing a culvert replacement, to basically cost out what that's going to cost and then come to the district and they'll review it. And once it's approved, away you go, and then you would draw down on the lump sum item or lump sum value in the quantified plan. So when you look in the quantified plan, you'll see the quantities. Of course, you fill in the unit prices, but you'll see an actual value in each service area for a total of lump sum amount. And that's what we draw down for each of the lump sum activities. There's an additional maintenance services schedule. This was something we didn't have in 0304. We had it in Service Area 11, and it's been slightly modified in this one. So take a look at that. It basically describes what we've been doing in the past, but it describes better on how we do additional maintenance services, how it's tracked, and how you would get paid to do that additional maintenance services. So that's a new schedule in this new contracts. There are some new environmental requirements as well. So you'll see a few different things in there. In addition to an invasive plant requirement, there is requirements for an environmental management plan in your QMS. And there's also requirements for submitting of a waste management plan. So there's a couple of examples of some additional environmental requirements, recognizing that environmental issues are becoming more and more prevalent in the world of maintenance. And there are, continuing as like 0304, there is minimum requirements for subcontracting and for hired equipment. If you notice that in Service Area 11, the requirement for subcontracting or a minimum requirement was removed. It is back in this contract. So take a look. The minimum requirement will vary per service area, so look closely at that. But there is a minimum requirement for subcontracting as well as hired equipment. And our contractor assessment program, so that's our CAP program or our bonus program, it will continue. But there is going to be some updates on it. So the wording is very similar in the contract. It's still going to have the ability to go to a maximum of 2% of the contract value at the ministry's discretion. But we will be updating the manual. So the CAP manual you'll see on the web right now, and what's in the data room is currently being updated now. We are going to try and get that out as soon as possible, recognizing that obviously while you're putting your bid together, you want to see what that new manual looks like. I'm hoping we'll have it out by early March. And some of the key changes we're trying to make to it is we want to be a little more descriptive of what the difference on compliance of the actual contract items and what is considered a true bonus, an actual bonus payment. So it'll be a little clearer what's compliance and what is bonus. So it's going to be a similar program, similar auditing, similar how we do our auditing of your works. But there will be some clarification. So keep an eye out for so the manual, like I say, you see right now in the data room is being updated right now, and you should be seeing a new one there hopefully by the end of next month. Now on to the RFP and some of the changes to the RFP. And I see we also have an online question, so I'll turn it over to Christina.
Thank you, Ian. Just for people who are sending in questions through the email address, I wanted to advise that I'm trying to kind of keep the questions on topic with Ian's questions. So if you are sending them in, I'll try my best to just stop him when he's talking on that particular topic. We've received a few questions with relation to the agreement before you move on to the RFP, so I thought I would interrupt you now. The first one is related to the quantified plan. And the person was wondering if they were understood in the past, I suppose in 0304, there was a requirement that the ministry had to advise the contractor within 5 days of whether the quantified plan was acceptable. And they were wondering if that requirement existed in the current RFP, and the answer to that question is no. We do not have that requirement for the ministry to accept the quantified plan. All the calculations that will be completed is detailed within the quantified plan if you decide to do a reduction to the quantified plan in the RFP. The second question is related to proposed yard locations. The question was, in round 5, the ministry required the contractors to make the yards available to the successful proponent. Does that requirement exist in round 6?
For the existing yards, so the answer to that is no. So we're not providing any maintenance yards. Any yards that any of existing contractors are in, at this point, they're either owned by that maintenance contractor or they're being leased and the leases will be up. Once the leases are up, what we are doing is cleaning up the yards and we'll be putting them up for sale through Shared Services BC.
And the next question is, will the ministry allow the contractors to operate out of ministry pits?
And the answer to that is no. So we do not want in the gravel pits any setups of actual maintenance yard activities in the pits. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the RFP and service areas. So we do have a bit of a change on the maximum number of service areas a proponent can be awarded. It used to be 4 back in 0304. It's been increased now to 5. You will see that when the RFPs came out this week, they came out a day apart. So we had Service Area 2 come out on Tuesday, Service Area 24 on Wednesday, and then Service Area 3 on Thursday. Any future RFPs that will be coming out, they will also be coming out in a set chronological order. And that's by design. So what will happen is that whatever order that they're actually going to be going out and being posted, that'll also be the order that they close. And through our evaluation, when we actually select a preferred proponent, that is also the order that the preferred proponents will be notified, and that is by design. So we want to do that so that you know as they're coming out, you recognize if this is the order they're going out, this is the order that I may potentially be notified. And the reason that's a key point is one of the key things for these service areas is once you're notified as the preferred proponent in a particular service area, that service area is going to count as one of your 5. So if you are pursuing more than one service area, and you're thinking you might be going close to that maximum, keep that in mind. So what happens is if if the RFP is closed, we've evaluated your proposal, you are selected as the preferred proponent, that counter for you is counted as number 1, regardless of what happens after that point. If you decide at some point in the future, after you've been notified as a preferred proponent, that you're going to withdraw, or if there's a default due to not providing us with all the QMS or anything of that nature, irregardless of that, your counter for one service area has now been ticked off. So now you're down to 4. So I just want everyone to know that, just knowing that, especially for those years strategizing on how you're going to select the service areas you're going to pick, those are some key points to note. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. Insurance and securities, there are some changes to the insurance and securities over previous versions. There has been some actual changes to the wording, recognizing, especially if you're familiar with the 0304 insurance and securities, a lot of things have changed in the last 15 years, so the wording has been updated. Bid security, probably the biggest change in the bid security side is before the only bid security you could use was an ILOC. Now you have the option of an ILOC or a bid bond, so that's something that's new. Under the contract securities, we do have the performance and labor bond payment values have increased, basically similar to what we had in Service Area 11. The increase in values is going to be related, it varies on the upset price in each of the service areas. And again, recognizing values and costs have gone up since 15 years ago, so the prices have gone up accordingly. On average, the values will range somewhere between $3 and $5 million. And as well, for term options, the term options are 5 years, and there is going to be a renewable clause in those securities. And for insurance, the insurance requirements will be very similar to what you've seen in previous rounds. So you'll see all the specimen documents in the RFP there, and you'll see that they do look very similar to in the past. One thing we're going to be doing that we did also in Service Area 11 that we heard good feedback from all of you is we are going to be offering a third-party document review. So what that is recognizing, even for a lot of you, it's been 15 years since you may have submitted all of these documents. For some of you, it might be the first time you're submitting insurance and security documents in this province. Our documents are very specific, and it's very specific on how you fill them out, and you cannot alter the wording. You have to fill them out in a very specific way, and if you do not, through our own rules, you potentially could be disqualified if this documentation is not filled out properly. Recognizing that we would rather not disqualify you on not doing that, we want to give you a chance to be able to fill them out properly. So we are going to offer, and it's optional for you, but you can offer to submit your third-party documents for a review. The review will typically happen around the halfway point of the RFP process. So the RFPs are out for about 2 months at around the 1 month mark, and you'll see deadlines in the RFP document when you need to submit them. You can submit them. And if you submit these documents, our procurement team will review them and provide comments back. Now, those comments back, providing them, does not guarantee that your documents will be approved at RFP closing time. By you submitting them at this review doesn't mean that that's your submission. This is just for review. You still have to submit your final documents at closing time. And again, it doesn't guarantee acceptance of those RFPs. And there's an online question.
Thanks, Ian. The online question is asking about the limit of 5 service areas and if Service Area 11 counts towards those 5 service areas, and the answer is yes, it does.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so that's the third-party document review. So again, it's optional if you decide to use it. I know in Service Area 11, many people use that option and found it to be very handy to get some feedback before they submitted their documents at RFP close. Another question?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. We have a question. Is there a requirement to retain an environmental emergency response company to respond to emergency situations associated with hazardous material spills? And the answer is the requirement would be to follow whatever the provincial or the federal guidelines are for emergency hazardous materials responses, such as CANUTEC.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Okay. In the RFP, you'll see this document called the Bring Down Relationship Disclosure Form. So this is in addition to the Relationship Disclosure Form that, for those of you that participated in the RFQ process, would have filled out. The idea of this document is for you to provide names and recognizing you already provided all that information at the RFQ stage. We don't want you to re-provide that same information. This is only for you to provide names if there are new names that you'll be providing, recognizing that now moving to the RFP stage or moving to a next level down that you may be providing some people that weren't provided at the RFQ stage, or you may even have new staff on in your group. So that's the names we would want to see. Again, you don't have to provide the ones you provided already through the RFQ. Or if some of your people that, since the RFQ time, a relationship has changed with any of the people that are on our restricted parties list. And I do recommend take a look on the RFP. The restricted parties list has been updated, so a few names have been added, a few names have been taken off, so take a look at that. And if any of your existing people in that list you provided at the RFQ, a relationship has changed, you just need to disclose that. So that's what we're looking for there, so you don't have to go through the whole repeating of all your staff. It's only if there's new staff or there's a change in the relationship. Moving into the evaluation. So the evaluation, there are 3 phases to this evaluation. There's the third-party document review. So the third-party document review, as well as the relationship disclosure information, you'll be providing to us in hard copy. It will come to the Victoria Project Office. Those are the first pieces of information that we take a look at, and we will be reviewing them, and it is a pass-fail for those. Again, you either are providing us the documentation and they're filled out properly or they're not. And you must pass that phase before we will look at the next phases of your proposal. So if you make it past that phase, we move into the service proposal evaluation. The service proposal evaluation is worth 30 points, similar to Service Area 11. It was 40 points in 0304, 30 points for this round. And you do need a minimum of 24 points to pass. So you'll see if you take a look in the RFP, it describes some of the questions that are being asked, as well as a distribution of the points. So you get a sense of what we're asking and how we're going to do that. Recognizing now that we are doing this RFQ process, the idea being that we've already reviewed your corporate structure and kind of the overarching parts of your QMS. So the questions that we'll be evaluating on your service proposal are much more service area specific, which I think is more useful for you. Now you can really concentrate on that service area that you are putting a bid on. So we will be evaluating aspects of your QMS. We will obviously, winter maintenance is a big thing for us. We'll be asking questions on your winter maintenance activities and how you're going to do that, as well as selected maintenance processes. And another question.
Thank you, Ian. The next question we received is wondering if Service Area 20 goes towards the 5 service area maximum, and the answer is it does. The new Service Area 20 contract that will be coming out in 2021 does count towards the 5 service area maximum.
Yeah, so, and it should point out, because I think it might be a little confusing when you read the RFP language in there. So Service Area 20, the future Service Area 20, the one that expires in 2021, it counts towards the 5 service area maximum. I think some of the wording it's confusing. It says that Service Area 20 doesn't belong in the what's called the competitive selection process. But if you read what the definition of the competitive selection process is it's the pre-qualification and being on our respondents list and then being available to bid on any of our service areas that are coming up for RFP. So these pre-qualifications that we're doing right now, like I say, if you've gone through the RFQ and you are now on our respondents list, you are now eligible to bid on any of our service area RFPs that will be coming out over this next year. Recognizing that Service Area 20 doesn't expire until 2021, I think we feel the information you're giving us now may be irrelevant. Obviously, many things can change. Your whole structure could change. A lot of people could retire. So when it comes to Service Area 20, we will be doing a separate RFP process specifically for that. So if you're pre-qualified today, you'll have to pre-qualify again if you want to bid on Service Area 20. And we have another question.
Yes. The question is, I've received several questions about the release of the next RFPs and when they'll be coming out. For this current moment, I would suggest taking a look at the RFQ we just released on BC Bid. It does have a timeline within it for the release of the next service areas, the next 5 service areas. But we'll also look at posting on our website a timeline with a little bit more information on what's coming up in the future.
Thanks, Christina. And we'll also be talking a little bit at the end of this this session a little bit more about what some of our timelines are for those future RFPs. Okay, so that's service proposal. So moving on from the service proposal, if your service proposal got the minimum 24 points and passed, we will then move on, and your proposal will move on, and we'll review then your price proposal. So the price proposal is worth 70 points in this round. And we are using, as we have in the past, what we call the upset price model. So that you'll see in all of these RFPs, there's an actual upset price that's provided in the document, so you know what the upper price is. And based on the upset price model, it means that you have 3 options that you can do as part of your proposal. So option number 1 is you state that you can do all of the work that's described in the agreement and in the specifications for the upset price. And if that's the case, you bid accordingly. Option number 2 is that you say that you can do all of that work that's in the agreement for less than the upset price, and if that's the case, you also bid accordingly. Option 3, which is a little more complicated, is if you feel that you're looking at all the requirements in the agreement and in the specifications and say that I can't do it for that upset price, it's an upset price model, I can't increase the upset price, so therefore I have to reduce some of the services that I am going to provide. And so that's what would be considered option 3. Option 1 and 2, I think, are fairly straightforward, understanding on how you would put your proposal together, but I'll go into a little bit more about option 3, because that is a little bit more complicated, so I want to make sure everybody understands how that works. So recognizing, I'm sure most of you recognize by now, in our maintenance contracts, we have 2 types of maintenance services. We have routine services and we have quantified services. So the routine services are things that are more cyclical in nature, or more things that happen as a result of something, so major events or winter maintenance, things of that nature are routine. We have quantified services, which are more planned events, so mostly summer activities, paving, ditching, mowing, things of that nature. If you are going with, if it's option 3 is that what you're planning to do for your bid, where you're saying that I have to reduce the services that are being required in this this RFP, you cannot reduce any of the routine services. So the only services that you can reduce are the quantified services. So you would be looking at that quantified plan and the quantified services. You'll see in the quantified plans that are in these RFPs, we would provide the units, basically the year 1 quantities that are required in each of the ones that have a unit price item. And then for the lump sum ones just say lump sum, and at the bottom we actually give you the number of what the total lump sum amount will be allocated for that service area for that year 1. So you as a contractor then, as you're putting together your proposal, you're the one, you will fill out obviously the unit prices of how much it will cost you to do any of those unit price activities. Once you've filled all of that out, then you're taking the unit price, multiplying by the quantity, you come up with a value for that unit, for that particular activity, add them all up, you'll come up with your summation of all of the, of how much in dollars it'll cost you to do all of those unit price activities, add that to our total lump sum number that's provided in the RFP, and you come up with your total quantified value. And then whatever that total quantified value is, whatever's left over is obviously the amount that you can use towards the routine activities. If you're, again, looking at this option 3, where you feel you have to reduce the services, once you have that number, you will then determine what you feel you have to reduce the amount by. And the number that you will give us, it'll be a monetary number. So if it's, say, when you've worked this all out, you say that the quantified services adds up to $5 million, and you say, okay, I think I have to reduce this by $1 million. That's the number that you'll provide us. You'll tell us I need to reduce the quantified services by $1 million. The number that you'll fill in the forms you see there is $1 million, and that's a key point. We don't want you to fill in what the new quantified price would be, which would be $4 million, and I'll describe later why that could really screw up our formulas. So you tell us how much you have to reduce your quantified services by. Don't give us the actual number it will be once you've reduced it. That's a key point. And then ultimately in the end, if you are the successful proponent and you've used this option 3 to create your bid and you are the successful proponent, what we would do then is we would take the upset price. The contract will be worth the upset price, but we will reduce the quantities and the lump sum total that's in that quantified plan by the amount that you said you had to reduce the services by. So that's how we'll work out the actual value of what. So the upset price will stay the upset price, but it'd be less quantities and a less lump sum number if it's option 3. And I think you have a question. I'll make sure the microphone comes by your way so you can...
I can talk loud too if you want.
Sure, I can repeat your question, so sure.
So my question is just that the amount that you reduce it by would just be extrapolated over the values, not where you choose, or over the lump sums? It would just be proportional to what was...
Yeah, so the question was, so if we're reducing the values, is it extrapolated across all the values? And the answer is yes. So all of the quantities will reduce by the same amount. So they all drop by the same amount, as well as the lump sum, there will be a proportion of it that drops. So everything drops by an equal amount. Okay, so so that's how you would do this if you were going to do option 3. That's how you would develop your price proposal. Based on that, when we get to the stage where we're doing the price evaluation, I want to describe a bit on how we'll actually do the price evaluation. So again, if you've got the minimum 24 points from the service proposal, you made it the price proposal, we will be opening all of the prices. We'll see all the prices there. We will take the lowest price of all the prices that are provided, and that becomes, if you look at this formula that's up on the screen here, that's what's called LP, or which is the lowest price. So say the upset price of the particular service area was $10 million, and somebody came in at $8 million. $8 million becomes the lowest price, and that particular one gets the maximum 70 points. Everybody's price that was higher than that, we'll use this formula. So basically it's 70 points, or 70 minus whatever your bid is. So say you bid at the upset price, it would be $10 million minus $8 million divided by $10 million, and you multiply by 70, and you'll end up with 60 some odd or 50 some odd points. And so that's how we'll actually be calculating out the points. If your bid, your price bid, you were using that option 3 where you ended up reducing the quantified services, what we will do is, for this purpose, to be able to do this calculation, we will be increasing your value by the amount you reduce it. So again, using my example, if you said it was going to be $5 million for quantified quantified services based on what you had figured out in your putting together your quantified proposal. You say you have to reduce by $1 million. So then for this thing here, if the upset price was $10 million, when we're doing this calculation for you, it would be $11 million, and then we'll work out your points based on that. So that's how the evaluation will work. One thing I wanted to note before a question comes in on that, where you'll see that we don't provide a sum of quantified services. We have done that in the past where we actually said this is the value of all the quantified services, lump sum and unit price. The one reason we don't want to do that is we recognize that if we do that, we basically then are trying to force you to make your unit prices fit our number, and that's not our goal. We want you to put in your unit prices of what you truly feel it costs you to do that work. That's kind of the whole point. We want to make sure you're using the value that you are comfortable with, that when you do that work, you feel you're doing it in a profitable way. So we don't want to try and alter that, and that, again, that is one of the reasons we've come up with the lump sum categories, and it's also why we try to break these down into more categories. We want to make sure that your unit prices you provide us are as best as you can, so you feel that when you're doing that work, it's actually what it's worth. Some of the changes to the maintenance standards. So as most of you are aware, we have a question from the audience. The microphone will be coming your way.
So just on that calculation then, if you are the successful proponent and your bid involves a reduction in quantified plan, you'd be using the proponent's unit rates for the purposes of reducing the quantified plan to the dollar value identified in the bid?
Yes, so the question was, so if you are the successful proponent and you had to use option 3 and you had to reduce the quantified plan, will we be using the unit rates that are proposed in that calculation? And the answer is yes. So whatever unit rates, and again, because we want you to use the actual proper unit rates, put in the unit rates, multiply by the quantity, come up with a final number at the bottom, and then you would do the reduction in services. So again, we don't want you to chart altering your unit prices to try and make it fit, because again, you'll end up with unit prices that you may feel you can't actually do the work for. So we'll use those unit prices, but what will happen is we'll reduce the quantities. So that's how that'll work. Question? We have an online question as well.
I think just to clarify how the price proposal works, just sort of in other words, because we are getting several questions about it. Basically, the way that it'll work is just an overview, kind of a short overview of what Ian just described, was that we'll be taking the value of your quantified plan value that you determine by the unit prices that you put in, assuming that if you do a reduction. We'll be taking that. We'll take that reduction. We'll add it, although it's a negative to the quantified value. Excuse me. We'll be reducing it when we determine your total price from what you propose as your annual amount, and then that will become as the proponent, your total price, and then to determine your value against another proponent, we'll take that value. Let's say that you are the lowest. You will get 70 points compared to other proponents. And then we will take everyone else and we'll compare it against that amount. So we take your value and divide it by the lowest value, and we multiply that by 70 points to give you your point value. I hope that helps to clarify. And all of those formulas are in the RFP.
Thank you. Yeah, you see the attachments are an Excel spreadsheet, so all the formulas are in there, so hopefully you're able to plug them in and it'll just populate on its own. So hopefully that makes sense. And we do have a sample in there as well that kind of describes a few different scenarios you'll see in there. One, I think, at upset price, below upset price, and one that's reduced to quantified, so hopefully it kind of makes sense. You can follow along and see how the logic works. Okay, maintenance standards. So like I was saying, when the RFQ went out in mid-September, we also provided a draft of the maintenance standards, because we recognize obviously that's a big part of the whole proposal. We wanted to get it out to you guys as soon as possible so you get a chance to look at it, and we also wanted to get some feedback from you all. So it's been good. We had a few months. We've gotten a lot of feedback from industry. Based on that, we have done some changes to the standards. Nothing major, but definitely some clarification, and I think we've tidied them up that I think, again, mostly to try and make it easier for you to make your bid so you understand what you're actually bidding on and what is expected of you. So I do recommend for those of you, especially if you do downloaded or printed out the one that's on the web, throw that one out. Use the specifications that are now attached to these RFPs. That is the most current specification. And recognize too that through the course of a procurement process, they may change. We will do addendums, so always keep an eye on BC Bid. And as these RFPs change, if we do any changes to the specs, that's where it'll change. We've actually removed the specification from the website because, again, we just don't want to get people confused of different versions out there. So anything on some of you took off the website, I'd recommend don't look at that one. Look at the ones that are in the RFP, the ones on BC Bid. That is the official, most latest version of the specs that we have. Just to give you a kind of a thought of some of the changes, again, most of the changes are very minor. I think the overall concept of what we're doing looked good based on what we're hearing from you as the industry in your feedback. But little changes to things like major event site definition. We've got change to that definition. I think it's a better definition. Added a definition for spray patching because that wasn't in there before. So again, to help people recognize what we are recognizing as spray patching, we've got definition for compaction or a revised compaction requirement. So again, there's a lot of questions on shouldering and things like that. How are you measuring compaction and how is it going to be audited? So I think that's a bit cleared up. One thing you wouldn't have seen in those initial specs, we only gave you the general specs. We didn't have any local area specs, of course, because local area specs are specific to each local area. But in this new specs, if you take a look in Service Area 2, 3, and 24, you will see 3 local area specs that will actually, those 3 local area specs will actually show up in all of our RFPs that are coming out, which I know kind of doesn't meet the definition of a local area spec. If it's going to show up in all of them, why isn't it just in the general specs? If you look at our general specifications, and I talked about this in our information session at the RFQ, they have changed a lot in their format. They are designed to be a performance-based specification, and if you read them, they do read a lot differently than 0304, and so and that's the style that we wanted to do that. If you look at these particular 3 specs, these specs are kind of new, especially, and they're listed there: highway crossing infrastructure, invasive plants, and salt containment infrastructure. Because they're new and they're specific of the things that we're looking and we want, they are a bit more prescriptive in nature, written more like a local area spec. Most local area specs are fairly prescriptive in nature because it's usually describing something very specific that we want done in that service area. So because of that, we turned them into a local area spec, even though we're recognizing they're going to show up in every contract. I guess mainly to help you just wrap your head around what we're looking for in there. What will most likely happen if we continue with these same style of specs in the next round, those 3 specs would just become part of the general specs. But that's the reason we've done that, just in case somebody questions, I see the spec show up in every single service area. That is why. It's just not written in the same style as the main general specs, so we put them as local area specs, even though they're going to show up every time. Moving on to the actual information available. So the reference information is all going to be only available electronically. There's no room of big massive binders of stuff anywhere. It's all electronically. It's housed in what we call the data room. Access to the data room is only for people that are on our qualified respondents list. So you had to go through the RFQ process, and once you've done that, you'll get access to the data room. You need an EBIT or a BC IDER access to get access to the data room. I recognize we've been getting a few questions on how to do that, and recognizing that obviously within your organization you'll probably have multiple people with BC EID addresses to want to get access to this. What we ask is to make sure that we are, and make sure that your own group is aware of who's getting access to it. If you want, because the way we're structured in our RFP and RFQ, you have a set contact person. There's one person that we are doing contact through. If you want to have additional people other than yourself that has access to this, we want to see an email come from that contact person, and you provide us the list of the people that you want to have access to the data room. So if you start firing us just random emails and there's an email from so-and-so, we won't provide access. We'll just send a note back saying, please come through your contact person. And again, that's just to follow our own rules properly. So just keep that in mind. We recognize obviously multiple people in your organization will probably need access to help you put together your bid, but that's the way we ask you to do that, please. And so then I will turn it over to Al. Al's going to show you that, I think, again, if you've seen Service Area 11 and the information that was in there, there's a lot more information that's been added, and a lot of that is based on industry feedback after Service Area 11. A lot of you described us, I think most people found the data room very handy, very helpful, but there was other things that they thought if you added this and that would be even better. So there is a lot more information in there. So what Al is going to do is show you what's been put in there, as well as how to navigate it, because the big thing is, again, the whole point of the data room is to help you put together a good bid and make it easier for you to put together your bid. So we want to make sure you can find the information that you are looking for in there. So that's where Al is going to walk you through and help you figure out ways of finding that. And so Al's doing that. Again, if you have questions, ask them as we're going along, and then Al can demonstrate as he goes. So I will now turn it over to Al. Okay. So you guys definitely have access to much more information than you could probably ever imagine, especially back at 0304. Thanks, Al. I do know that a bunch of questions have come in as well. Did you want to cover some of those right now before we go to kind of next steps?
Sure.
So I'll turn it over to our people over here.
Okay, so I'll try and cover some of the questions that have come in that we've gotten, Dan, as well. So one of the questions we received is regarding the highway maintenance agreement that we provide as part of the RFQ process is called the draft highway maintenance agreement, and how that kind of translates to the final one you'll be signing. So we've just identified that there's sort of three different highway maintenance agreements. The draft one is what's attached to the RFP. If there were to be any addendums to that draft agreement, it would become the definitive highway maintenance agreement. And then we have the last highway maintenance agreement, which we'll be signing. So the execution of that will happen sort of when you are determined the preferred proponent and you complete a quality management system, which we will approve. And then you'll sign off on the final agreement. And that kind of makes you the contractor in that service area. So I hope that helps to clarify that question. I've also received a question about the local area spec salt containment infrastructure maintenance, and if the specification is all routine, and the answer is yes to that question. I've also been asked if in the communications specification, if the term communications platform is defined. And yes, it is defined. If you look in section 5 of schedule 1, there's a definition section specific to the specifications. So you'll find the definition there. I've also been asked about the third-party documents. Just going to run right through them. The third-party documents, and if a ILOC or bid bond, how that kind of works there. So there are 3 third-party documents that need to be submitted as part of the third-party document envelope. It will be, in every case, a consent of surety and an undertaking to provide liability insurance. And then there is a choice to either submit an irrevocable letter of credit, an ILOC, or a bid bond. So every envelope will contain the first 2, consent of surety and undertaking to provide liability insurance, and then either an ILOC or a bid bond. The last question, before I turn it over to Dan, is in your presentation, in Ian's presentation, he referred to waste management plans and environmental management plans, and they were wondering where those can be found. Waste management, the reference to waste management plans, you can find that in the Appendix G, the Draft Highway Maintenance Agreement, in Article 15, and the environmental management plan can be found in Article 17 of the Appendix G Highway Maintenance Agreement.
Okay, thanks, Christina. So we got a question here with regards to Appendix B in the RFP. And the question is in relation to winter storm intensities, obviously for the first 3 RFPs that have gone out to tender. The question is in relation to knowing that the weather patterns can be different across the province and in these service areas. Wondering why the storm intensities are the same for all the service areas. And part of the reason for that is based on our historical analysis, and also recognizing that we're in an era of climate change. We're looking at long-term contracts. We want to get an assurance, and there's always the potential that you're going to have storm intensities. We felt that that was a good range of estimates for storm intensities provincially, so that was sort of the rationale behind that. So that was that question. Sure.
Yeah, I had a similar question actually. So just to build off of that, so is that the ministry's intent for the contractors to build their operational delivery plans off the back of the moderate storm events for each of the service areas?
Yeah, that would be the intent of that. That would be the expectation.
Should that make its way through to the specification then rather than the technical document?
That's not really a question that I think I could answer right now.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? Another question we had with regards to the maintenance services reporting manual. The question is bearing in mind that this represents a change from past reporting processes. And the question is, will we provide a follow-up webinar sort of outlining and explaining this new system? Currently, we don't have any plans for that, but we certainly recognize that this is a rather significant change. So it's something we'll certainly take into consideration for how we actually might want to roll out something a little bit more responsive to that. Another question is in relation to the winter storm intensity again. The question is it the ministry's intent that a moderate storm is deemed to be one that deposits 2 to 3 centimeters of snow per hour for 11 hours with a total of accumulation of between 22 to 33 centimeters? So the answer to that would be, yeah, the expectation would be for a moderate storm intensity with an average 2 to 3 centimeters for an extended period of more than 11 hours. So that would be basically the understanding of that is yes. Another question with regards to materials. Materials to be deployed by each equipment. This is section 3.4. Can you please clarify what you are asking for? Are you asking for material that's able to be applied or expected materials to be applied over the 11-hour period? This question refers specifically to the types of equipment and the types of materials over that duration of that storm cycle. That's all the questions I had, actually.
Okay, do you have any others? No? Okay. All right, so then going forward, I wanted to give you some idea of some of the next steps that will be occurring over the next few months, actually. As you all know, and I've mentioned this already, this week we did get 3 RFPs out on BC Bid, so Service Area 2, 3, and 24 are out. Today there is an RFQ that's out for the next 5 service areas. So moving forward, that the RFQ that's out right now will be out for a month. It will close about mid-February. And then we'll start the evaluation on those RFQs. Our plan is then in early March, we'll be then announcing the people that qualified from that RFQ. What we will do, and like I've said in the past, is if you've already qualified in the RFQ, you don't have to qualify again. So the plan will be if there are new additional qualified respondents, they just get added to our qualified respondents list. So that list will hopefully just grow over time. At that same time then, those service areas, those 5 service areas, so that's service area 4, 9, 12, 15, and 27, I think. They will go out to RFP at that time for 2 months. All of the RFPs will be going for a 2-month period. And then we will release a 3rd RFQ. So that RFQ will probably be for the next 6. So again, we'll start batching these RFQs together. So over the next, I have an online question on this.
Sorry, one last question I missed. Why were the proponents not provided with their RFQ marks detailed by section? And the answer is that the RFQ was basically a pass-fail. So if you passed, then there was really no requirement for any further information. So that was basically the question that someone had.
Great. Thanks, Dan. So then an RFQ will be coming out for the next service areas. So going forward, there will be the RFQs will be bunched together in kind of logical forms, recognizing that, or hoping as this process goes on, the amount of people applying on the RFQ stage will get less and less. So there'll probably be, I'm guessing, about 4 or 5 more RFQ intakes, and then the RFPs will be going out as required. In mid-March, the RFPs will close for Service Area 2, 3, and 24, the ones that are out this week. We will spend about a month evaluating those RFPs, And then mid-April, we're hoping that we will be notifying the successful or preferred proponents for those 3 service areas. And then going forward from that, basically from April all the way through to October of this year, the remaining RFQs and RFPs will be coming out. So throughout this year, you'll see 26 RFPs between now and October will be out on BC Bid. And then the first contracts will start up this September. Those are the first ones that are expiring. So our goal will be, and this is just showing you here, it gives you a sense of the renewal timelines. What this chart is showing is when each of these contracts are expiring. So you can assume the first 8, you see there's a bit of a gap, and then you see the rest of them. The first 8, we're a little behind on our ultimate goal, but with the ones going forward from March onwards, our ultimate goal is if you are interested in a particular service area, take a look at when that particular service area is going to expire and assume 1 year in advance of that is when that RFP will go out. So if you're looking at something in July, expires July 31st of 2019, expect to see an RFP for that particular service area to go out around July 31st of 2018. But one thing to note too, if you are interested in that and you haven't gone through the RFQ process and got pre-qualified, it won't necessarily be a month before that RFP goes out is when that RFQ will go out, because again, if we're batching them together, the RFQ for that particular one may have gone 2 months in advance or 2.5 months in advance. So keep an eye out on BC Bid as these RFQs come out. They'll say an RFQ for, and we'll list the service areas that it applies to. And then you have to make sure that you're in at that point if that's a particular RFP that you're interested in. But on average, it will be, typically we're going to try and get out exactly 1 year in advance of that expiry date, get the RFPs out just to get sufficient mobilization time and things of that nature in place. And so that's what's going to be happening, I guess, over the next 11 months. It's going to be definitely an exciting time, I'm sure, for both of us. I'm sure you guys will be quite busy, and I'm sure you'll be asking a lot of questions. Like I say, for the information session, at this point, this was the only information session we're planned. It is an interesting question when we're talking about work reporting. If we feel we're getting a lot of questions on work reporting or any of our other items, and we feel we need to do another information session, we will definitely set one up if it feels necessary. Otherwise, any questions you do have, now that we're in our full procurement process, we do ask you apply to that email address that's at the bottom of the slide here. That's the official contact place to contact us. Any questions that come in, we will review them, and any answers that we'll be providing, we will provide on the data room. So all questions that come in, all of them will be published and answered. So just again, to be open and transparent, we're recognizing any questions coming in. If we're providing an answer, we want to provide it to all proponents. So that's how it'll be done. There's a question there, so Rachel's just going to come around with a mic.
Could you go back to the chart with all the dates on it?
Sure. That one there?
Yeah, do the dates on the table, are those the contract expiry dates, or are those the anniversary dates of the contracts?
Well, there might be the anniversary dates, because the contract expiry dates did shift when we did the extensions in 2012, 2013. So they may move a little bit. So you'll know the anniversary dates are typically in the middle of the month. The true expiry dates now after the extensions, the 5-year extensions, will go to mostly to the end of the month. So they're probably actually showing the anniversary dates. Sorry. Okay. So take a look at. Typically, if it is in the middle of the month, if it's later in the month, it'll be more likely at the end of the month. Earlier in the month, it'll go to the beginning of the month. So yeah, they probably don't quite line up. So that's true.
Will you be working the procurement timelines back from the anniversary date though, or from the expiry date?
From the expiry date.
Okay.
Yeah. So if it expires April 31st, the plan is to get the RFP out around April 31st.
Thank you.
Any other questions here in the audience or online? This is your final chance. After that, I'll have to go through emails. So I think we've provided you with a whole whack of information, so I'm hoping this has been useful, this information session. And I think, like you say, on our data room, we've got lots of good information there for you. If you have questions, fire them through an email. And like I say, if we do find that you're getting a lot of questions on a particular topic, we can always create another information session. That's not an issue, and we can do it again this way, live and online. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending, and for you that are proponents that are going to be bidding on our RFPs, I wish you good luck, and I'm sure we'll be chatting more in the future. So thank you very much, and everyone have a good afternoon.